The first sound at my father's funeral wasn't a prayer. It was laughter. His laughter, coming from inside the coffin. Right after my sister-in-law announced my brother as the new CEO. That sound shattered everything they thought they owned. The cathedral in Chicago was packed with the most powerful people in logistics. Executives, board members, politicians. Black marble floors. Stained glass glowing like judgment. My father's coffin sat at the altar, polished, final. Samantha grabbed the microphone before the priest finished speaking. She didn't look sad. She looked triumphant. With heavy hearts, she said, smiling, "We move forward. My husband, Zachary, will officially take over our $600 million company." She waited for applause. Instead, a dry chuckle echoed through the speakers. Zachary froze. His face drained of color. Because that laugh, sharp, familiar, disappointed, belonged to our father. It wasn't a ghost. It was a recording. And it was about to expose everything. 10 minutes earlier, Zachary and Samantha were treating the funeral like a coronation. Not grief. Networking. Zachary shook hands with board members like the job was already his. Samantha whispered about redecorating the executive floor, while staring at the stained glass like it was real estate. I sat in the front pew, invisible. Zachary leaned toward me. "Adjusting a tie worth more than my rent. Don't worry, Jessica. We'll find something for you. Basement level, paperwork, someone has to do the boring stuff," he smirked. A glorified secretary, that's what he saw me as. I didn't cry. I didn't react. I felt something colder than anger, clarity. Across the aisle stood Peter. My father's chief of staff for 40 years. He held a small remote in his hand. I met his eyes and gave one slight nod. Peter stood, walked to the back of the cathedral, and quietly locked the doors. Then he pressed play. The projector flickered to life behind the altar. My father appeared on screen, sitting at his desk, staring straight into the camera. No warmth, no softness. The face he used right before firing someone. The chuckle played again. The coronation was over. The audit had begun. As the room stared at the screen, my mind drifted to where this empire was actually built. Not boardrooms, rail yards at 3 a.m. Frozen warehouses in Detroit. Crisis calls from Rotterdam Customs. For 10 years, I was the ghost in the machine. While Zachary chased prestige and parties, I negotiated with unions, patched cyber attacks, rerouted failing supply chains. I missed weddings. I spent birthdays in server rooms. I saved $12 million in 1 year alone by cutting waste no one else even noticed. I believed competence would be enough. I believed silence was dignity. I was wrong. My silence wasn't strategy, it was permission. They didn't see me as a partner. I was infrastructure. You don't thank a foundation, you assume it will always hold. They thought I was quiet because I was weak. They didn't know I was keeping score. 3 days earlier, our father hadn't even been gone 4 hours when Zachary and Samantha went straight to headquarters. Not the funeral home. The office. Peter and I were already there, stabilizing stock, calming partners. Then the elevator opened. Zachary walked in wearing navy, not black. He ran his finger across my father's handmade desk. "This has to go. Too rustic." Samantha was on the phone. "We'll gut the floor. Lounge, wet bar, maybe a helipad. Zachary deserves an entrance." Peter warned them about pensions, liquidity drivers. Zachary laughed. Fired him on the spot. Then he grabbed papers from my hands and tossed them on the floor. "You can stay?" he sneered. "Handle filing. Coffee, you're good at that." They talked about selling the fleet to buy a villa in Tuscany. I picked up the papers quietly. I looked at Peter. The plan was born. Back in the cathedral, my father spoke. "Zachary," the recording said, "you've been waiting for me to die so you could stop asking permission and start spending." The screen shifted to a massive spreadsheet. Red numbers, millions burned, nightclubs, cars, consultants. Failure after failure. "I wasn't spoiling you," my father said calmly. "I was testing you." He had given Zachary unlimited resources to see if he'd build or destroy. "You failed." Then came the paperwork. "Those weren't gifts," my father said. "They were loans. Against your inheritance." A clause appeared on screen. Debt over $6 million meant forfeiture of all equity. Zachary's debt 6.2. Someone paid it, my father continued, so the company wouldn't collapse. The transfer receipt appeared. Sender Jessica Vance. "You didn't inherit the company," my father said softly. You sold it. And your sister bought it. Then he looked into the camera with warmth meant only for me. Jessica. The keys are in the safe. Fire him. The screen went black. Samantha stared at Zachary with disgust. She shoved him. You lied to me. Zachary ran to me shaking. You can't do this. We're family. I stepped back and handed him an envelope. Termination. Effective immediately. And a repayment schedule for the remaining $200,000. I felt nothing. Just efficiency. Walking out of the cathedral, the air felt lighter. Peter opened the car door for me, the same door he'd held for my father for decades. This time it was mine. That night I slept peacefully. The empire was finally safe. For the first time in years I didn't wake up to panic. No buzzing phone. No crisis overseas. No fire to put out before sunrise, just silence. The kind of silence that means things are finally under control. By 7 a.m., the boardroom was full. Same faces that had ignored me for a decade now sat straighter when I entered. No whispers. No side glances. Respect doesn't announce itself, it shows up quietly, all at once. Peter stood beside me as I took my seat at the head of the table. My father's chair. The weight of it didn't crush me anymore. It fit. We didn't waste time. I confirmed pension protections first. Then fleet stability. Then long-term contracts Zachary had nearly destroyed with his ego. Every decision was surgical calm. Measured. The room followed my lead without question. Because they knew something now. I wasn't new to this job. I had been doing it for 10 years, without the title. By noon, the company email went out, clear, professional, final. Zachary Vance is no longer affiliated with the organization in any capacity. No drama. No explanation, just truth. The fallout was fast. Sponsors pulled out of Zachary's personal ventures within hours. Banks froze accounts. Friends stopped answering his calls. The lifestyle he thought was permanent evaporated the moment the money did. Samantha filed for divorce that afternoon. I didn't read the details, I didn't need to. That evening, I walked through the main distribution warehouse alone. Engines hummed. Forklifts moved with precision. Drivers nodded as I passed, not because of my last name, but because they knew me. I had stood beside them in storms. I had answered their calls at midnight. I had fought for their jobs when no one was watching. This wasn't revenge fueled by rage. It was justice built on receipts. Zachary didn't lose because I hated him. He lost because he never learned the difference between power and performance. As I turned off the lights and locked the office, I felt something I'd never felt before. Not victory. Ownership. The empire wasn't loud anymore. It was stable, and for the first time, it was finally led by someone who knew how to carry it. The next week was when reality truly caught up to him. Zachary started showing up places he used to own, restaurants where managers once comped his meals, clubs where his name used to open doors. This time the smiles were polite, short, professional. Bills were placed gently on the table. Security stood a little closer. Power disappears faster than money, because money at least leaves paperwork. He tried calling board members. None answered. He emailed partners. Auto replies came back. No longer with the company. That phrase followed him like a shadow. One afternoon, Peter told me Zachary had come to headquarters. Not demanding, not arrogant, begging. I didn't rush. I finished my meeting, signed documents, approved a new safety protocol for drivers. Then I walked down to the lobby. He was sitting on a leather couch he used to walk past without seeing. His suit was wrinkled. His confidence was gone. When he looked up at me, his eyes searched for the sister he thought he could guilt back into place. I made mistakes, he said quickly. But we can fix this. I can learn, I can help. I studied him in silence. For years he never asked what I did, never asked how the company actually survived. He only showed up when something needed funding, or forgiveness. This company doesn't need help, I said finally. It needs discipline. And you've never respected that. He swallowed hard. Dad wouldn't want this. I shook my head. Dad designed this. That was the moment it broke him. Not anger, not yelling. Understanding. Security escorted him out gently. No scene, no humiliation, just finality. That night I visited my father's old office alone. The desk Zachary wanted to throw away was still there. Scratched, solid, honest. I opened the safe. Inside were handwritten notes. Margins filled with observations. Names, dates. Small reminders of who had shown up when it mattered. My name appeared more than once. I sat there for a long time. Not crying, not celebrating. Just breathing. Legacy isn't about who stands closest to power. It's about who carries the weight when no one is watching. Weeks passed. The company stabilized. Profits leveled. Morale rose. Drivers stopped worrying. Engineers started innovating again. Quiet competence has a ripple effect. Zachary faded from headlines, from conversations, from relevance, and that was the real revenge. Not watching him fall, but watching the empire rise without him. I didn't take his place. I reclaimed mine. Months later, people stopped asking about Zachary altogether. Not because they were afraid to mention him, because there was nothing left to say. His name no longer triggered reactions. No anger. No pity, just a brief pause. Like remembering an outdated system that had already been replaced. That's when I knew it was truly over. One evening after a 14-hour day, I stood on the rooftop of headquarters. The city stretched out below me, alive and relentless. Trucks moved like veins through the streets, carrying goods, medicine, food. Evidence that the machine was running smoothly. Because it was finally being respected. I thought about all the nights I had swallowed my voice. All the moments I convinced myself that being useful was the same as being valued. I understood now how dangerous that lie was. Zachary never lost the company in a single moment. He lost it slowly, every time he confused entitlement with leadership. And I didn't win it in a dramatic takeover. I earned it. One solved crisis at a time, one sacrifice no one applauded, one quiet decision to keep going when quitting would have been easier. The irony is, if Zachary had ever looked closely, if he had ever asked how things actually worked, I would have taught him everything. But he never wanted knowledge. He wanted the crown. I locked the rooftop door behind me and headed downstairs, past offices still lit by people who believed in what we were building. People who knew their work mattered. That's what real power looks like. Not applause in a cathedral, not a title handed down. But trust. And trust is the one thing money can't buy back once it's gone. My father once told me, empires don't fall because of enemies. They fall because of heirs. I proved him wrong. This one survived because the wrong heir finally stepped aside. And the right one stopped standing in the shadows. The last time I heard Zachary's name, it wasn't in a boardroom or a headline. It was from Peter. He mentioned it casually, almost as an afterthought, while handing me a report. Zachary had taken a short-term consulting job, contract work, no equity, no authority. Just hours billed and invoices reviewed by someone else. For the first time in his life, he was being evaluated. I didn't feel satisfaction, I felt closure. Because the truth was simple. Zachary didn't lose everything because of one bad decision. He lost it because he never learned to carry responsibility when no one was clapping. And I didn't take anything from him. He gave it away. Every time he chose image over effort. Every time he mistook access for ability. Every time he laughed while others worked. The empire didn't need revenge. It needed stewardship. On the anniversary of my father's death, I visited the distribution center outside the city. Same one where I'd once stood ankle, deep in slush at 3 in the morning. I walked the floor, talked to drivers, listened instead of performing. Before I left, I stood alone for a moment, and looked at the trucks rolling out. This was the sound of continuity, of something built to last. My father's laughter had echoed once in a cathedral and ended a lie. But the real legacy wasn't that moment. It was this. A company still standing, people still employed. An empire no longer confused about who it belonged to. I didn't win by destroying my brother. I won by becoming undeniable. And that's the kind of victory no one can ever take from you. Years from now, people would talk about that day in the cathedral like it was a legend. They'd remember the laughter. They'd remember the screen. They'd remember the public collapse of a man who thought inheritance was destiny. But what they wouldn't see were the quiet days that followed. The days that actually mattered. Leadership isn't proven in moments of spectacle. It's proven on ordinary Tuesdays when nothing is wrong, and you still choose to do things right. I changed very little at first. That was intentional. The drivers kept their routes. The engineers kept their systems. The company kept its soul. I didn't need to announce myself. Everyone already knew who had been holding the walls up. Over time, the numbers spoke for me. Turnover dropped. Safety incidents declined. Long-term contracts renewed early. Partners who had been hesitant under Zachary suddenly leaned in again. They trusted stability. They trusted consistency. They trusted me. Every now and then, someone would ask what it felt like to fire my own brother. I always gave the same answer. I didn't fire him. He resigned years ago. It just took time for the paperwork to catch up. The truth is, revenge was never the point. Revenge is loud, temporary, hungry. What I wanted was permanence. One evening, as I locked up late, I stopped in front of my father's old photograph in the hallway. The one taken before the company went public. No suit, no polish. Just tired eyes and stubborn pride. I didn't speak out loud. I didn't need to. Some conversations don't require words. I walked out into the night knowing something Zachary never would. Real power doesn't come from being chosen. It comes from being necessary. And once you become that, no one can ever erase you again. The story didn't end with applause. It ended with balance. Years passed, and the company grew, not recklessly, not loudly, but correctly. New hubs opened. Old mistakes stayed buried. The kind of growth that doesn't make headlines, but keeps thousands of lives stable. That's the kind my father believed in. Sometimes I'd catch my reflection in the glass of the boardroom windows late at night. Same building. Same city. Different woman, not because power changed me, but because I finally stopped shrinking myself to make others comfortable. Zachary never came back. Not to the company, not to the conversation, and that was mercy. Because watching the world move on without you is far heavier than any punishment I could have given. On quiet mornings, when the trucks roll out in perfect sequence and the systems hum exactly as they should, I think back to that moment in the cathedral. The laughter. Not cruel, not mocking. Instructional. My father didn't laugh because he'd won. He laughed because the truth finally had a microphone. He knew the empire would survive. He knew who had earned it. He just needed the room to see it. And I did the rest. So if there's anything this story proves, it's this. You don't need to announce your power. You don't need to demand respect. You don't need to fight for a crown that was never meant for you. You just need to become so essential that removing you would collapse everything. That's not revenge. That's inevitability. And once you understand that, you never stand in the shadows again.